Right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Nutrient Management Board. I'm Councillor Liz Swinkhurst. I'm current chair of the Nutrient Management Board, and this is the meeting on Wednesday, the 11th of October. So first item on the agenda is welcome and apologies. I have had an email apology from Councillor Ed Jones from Paris. Are there any other apologies that anyone needs to give to be recorded in the minutes?
I had a decline from Andrew Grant from Forest of Dean. That was the only other one I received.
Alrighty, thank you.
I've been asked to attend in place of Helen Loco from Bannerbrooke.
Okay, welcome Tom, nice to have you here.
Chair, just to confirm I'm attending on behalf of Monmouthshire County Council officers today.
Okay, thanks Mark, it's lovely to have you. Okay, everyone got that? That's great, thank you. Minutes of the last meeting, no matter of accuracy been received by the clerk. Has anybody got anything they'd like to raise now? And so are we all broadly content with the minutes of the last meeting? Please wave at the camera or something. Ooh, it all. Excellent, thank you. Matters arising. Couple of things that I picked up, just making sure they don't get kind of lost completely. Martin Quine, you were going to do an update on the Tara project.
Yes, I'm happy to cover that when we get to the environmental agency update section.
Fabulous. There was an action for creation of a ready-made bid database, but it wasn't terribly clear in the minutes who was going to do that. I think it was something that had come out of a conversation that Simon was having. Is anybody doing that or owning that, or is it, because it seemed like a sensible idea? So Simon.
This is a work in progress. It's coming out of the issues list that was discussed at the Catchment partnership to create a pipeline of bids. As I said, we're working on it. Hopefully it will be ready in a month or so.
Okay, all right. So can we put that down as a WAF thing?
What we're doing is we're creating a pipeline of opportunities, and then we're trying to align funding to those opportunities for the benefit of the benefit of the Wide Catchment partnership to go and get it basically. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's great, Simon. Thanks. It was just that we had it as an action, but we didn't put anyone to it. I just wanted to make sure. I had a feeling it would be you, but just if we can just minute it that it was the Wires Foundation Wide Catchment Partnership collaboration doing that work, that'd be very good. So thanks, and that's all I had for that. Public questions. Is Richard in the meeting? Because he was going to submit a written question about sort of missed the deadline, so I said he could come in and ask it.
Not in the waiting room. If he's watching on YouTube, can you pop in the waiting room over the next few minutes, and we'll circle back to that while we just go through the rest of the agenda.
Okie dokie. Well, we'll start on the updates on activity since the last meeting, and thank you to the statutory agencies for sending in their updates. Can we start with the Environment Agency then? You sent the link to the web page, which is really excellent, but it's not very easy to pick up where it's different from it was the last time.
Yeah, so I'll give an update on that if you don't mind, Chair.
Yeah,
so we have got the engagement HQ page, so that's the specific web page for the wide, just for wider awareness. We are going through a development phase. I think that the web page is very well regarded. We've had some good feedback, but the plan is to try and make it a bit more user friendly, a bit more accessible. And I think previously we've talked about the idea of some form of dashboard. I think we used to have a similar dashboard in the past. So we're going to work through what that looks like, but we're also going to do some user testing. So we will reach out to some of the partners and stakeholders just to get some views around what they would like and some of their ideas before we launch it formally. in terms of the updates, we will be putting some of our findings from the summer period. So we had sonds out in the river. The sonds have recently been removed. And what we will do is we will draw comparisons, very different summer this year compared to last, of what we saw last year, what we've seen this year, and some of the different trends. So that will be on probably towards the end of this month, early November. The regulatory side then, so we continue to focus on the wide catchment as a West Midlands priority. And in the period between the last meeting, so April onwards, we have done 159 farm visits. And we did, including that, a targeted campaign where we did 38 farm visits over 2 days. And we joined up with the National Farmers Union in terms of trying to signpost some of the regular errors we find in non-compliance, which predominantly relate to nutrient planning. So that's a thing we'll focus on. In terms of the intensive side, so the intensive poultry units, we've done 14 inspections, and we found that it's fairly high compliance. We do mention Project Tara, and I know that came up in the last meeting. So for the context of what Project Tara is, it's an acronym. So what it's about is it's about new approaches that we're trialing for agriculture. So that's what it stands for. But in simple terms, it's about auditing the manure that's produced from poultry units and digestate from AD plants and tracking that through from production to end use. So it's much more focused and it's much more detailed than some of the traditional farm inspection work. We've done about 13 farm inspections in total, but this is a rolling piece of work, so we'll continue. The plan as part of Project Tara would be also to audit every AD site, so focusing specifically on the wide catchment. And every AD site would include those that are not regulated by the Environment Agency. So previously in this meeting, we've talked about the ones which fall within the Environment Agency. We know that some are fed by feedstock, such as maize. Those sites fall out of our remit, but we are committed to looking at, again, the movement of digestates and manures from those type of sites. In terms of Project Tara, what we do is we look at nutrients for the that have been applied on farms for the last 4 years, and essentially we validate that with discussions with sort of land management, and we look at the volume that has been applied. And then what we do is we calculate the rates and make sure that's in line with crop need, and where it's not, we use our regulatory tools to correct that. As this project develops further, we will have some more conclusive outcomes. We're really in the early stages. So as we target more sites and we expand it, we'll have a better granularity in terms of what is the true level of compliance and where we need to focus some of our targeted work in terms of where in a catchment are we best off doing more farm visits, where do we perhaps need to step back from because we want to use the resources in the right place. And in terms of a further update then, so we are going to begin a process of the development of a diffuse water pollution plan. So the diffuse water pollution plan will form part of a wider review of the nutrient management plan. And what the purpose of the diffuse water pollution plan, similar to where we need the nutrient management plan to evolve to, is the focus on what data have we got, what more do we need, what modelling do we have, what's the impact of that, and what are the right interventions. So that will be developed over the coming months. And I think that's everything, unless you've got any questions.
Thanks, Martin. That's fabulous. What an incredible amount of work that has been going on the last few months. How many farm visits in 2 days? That was amazing.
30 over 2 days, and they were specifically focused on the lug catchment, which we know has some of the greatest pressures.
So well done.
And we do plan a further campaign in the next coming months. Really great in terms of also getting that visibility in the catchment, which we don't necessarily get where we do it like the routine way of doing it.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I was just going to touch briefly on I think it's something that I mentioned to you at the Catchment Partnership, which is the fresh plough, the fields with fresh plough at this time of year, and how are you managing that? Because that's a huge area to get around.
So we have recently done some work with satellite imagery. So we've got Sentinel Satellite 2 imagery. So the satellite goes across the catchment, I think, twice a week. So we can look at mapping where some of those pressure points are in the catchment, so which fields are generally bare. But this innovation, if you like, is emerging, and we're taking some lessons learned from some work we've done recently to make sure that we are understanding, essentially, bare earth doesn't necessarily equate to non-compliance. What we have to do is we have to assess that against whether, say, a farmer has got what we call appropriate measures in place or reasonable precautions. In simple terms, we're looking at, have they got buffer strips? Have they got undersowing? Actually, is it a really low gradient of field? So therefore, perhaps don't need the same measures in place that you would if you're against the river. So this is some work we're doing. We've also got a drone pilot now within West Midlands. So where we've got fields or areas we want to target, we are able to effectively get that bird's eye view of the catchment, because what you see up above is very different to what you see on the ground. And what we do ask is that if anybody identifies fields or got any concerns, report it to our incident hotline. And what we can do is we can add it to the list in terms of which sites we focus on next, because actually the intelligence and the information coming from the catchment is really important, because we've got a finite resource. We focus based upon data and evidence, including the citizen science, but what we can't be is everywhere at the same time. So we are seeing a few reports coming in, and we can direct some of our resources to those areas where there's a greatest, perhaps, public concern.
Brilliant. That's really, really helpful. There's a question from Councillor Charlton about whether or not any of the work involves the Welsh lug.
So yeah, so in terms of the Environment Agency's remit, it sits on the English side.
Yeah.
So we will stop at the border, but as you know from previous calls, we really do work closely with Anne and her teams within Wales.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maybe.
Thanks. You may have already answered this actually, but I was wondering, you said that inspections of the IPUs, that they were fairly compliant. I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about in what ways they were not or not as compliant as you'd like to. I imagine it's either they are or they aren't, but I don't know. I'd be interested to know the detail.
So in terms of IPUs, generally speaking, they're in compliant. And the reason why is because when we look at an intensive poultry unit, it is a discrete area that's permitted. So the regulatory role we have is specifically looking at how they manage the emissions, which will be emissions to air. If they don't apply, say, manures to the land, say the farmland surrounding the unit, it falls out of the regulatory requirements of the permitted site. This is where Project Tara comes in, because actually we therefore track where that's going to, but it's also where our regulation of wider farming comes in. And really the focus is on manure management, I think, in terms of the catchment, but the IPUs, we're looking at it against a permit. So are they complying with the permit conditions? Are they meeting the various the scrubbers and all the infrastructure that needs to be put in place? So it's more of a physical inspection of a site infrastructure rather than the wider fewer emission, which we would see deposited across the catchment elsewhere. And this is where the wider regulatory role comes in, because that's where we're looking at manure management plans and assess it against crop need. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks.
Rachel Joy.
Martin, thank you for your helpful report. I wanted to focus in on one area. Recently, we've seen a published Freedom of Information request that talks about your enforcement activity. And I think there's some helpful clarifications there about your approach to enforcement. I think were not implicit in the response because the question wasn't asked. Is your enforcement approach one that is intelligence-led, so that you're targeting the farms where you suspect that there might be an issue, which would give a higher rate of potentially give a higher rate of non-compliance than just a random selection of farms? So I just want to understand that better, because I think that's an important clarification that the public need to understand.
So in terms of our approach, it's data and evidence led. So we produced our data and evidence report a few months back. We've got a smaller version, as I alluded to at the beginning, that's coming out in the next couple of weeks. Essentially what that report does, it looks at the water quality monitoring we've done, the ecological monitoring we've done, and including the work on the sondes. It does feature the citizen science. So that gives us almost the hotspots in the catchment. So the way we direct our regulation is to those parts of the catchment, because that's where we see the greatest pressure. The regulatory work would therefore identify the level of compliance. And in terms of the freedom of information request you mentioned, that has come about as a result of the inspections that we've undertaken. So what you've seen is the level of compliance we've experienced within the sites we've inspected, based upon the data and intelligence. So it's in a way directing the resources in the right place rather than being more broader across the catchment. You don't necessarily get the right focus. And the other point to raise is, and this is the importance of where people within the catchment find issues, if we get additional intelligence where, for example, people have seen pollution or have wider concerns, we are quite agile to how we regulate, so it is not fixed. So we can flex priorities and resources based upon wider intelligence that we receive from those within the catchment itself.
So it's smart coppering. Thanks very much, Martin.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just ask that well, I've had an email from Tom Johnson saying he's getting kicked out of the meeting. I don't know if that's something that it may be a software issue, but if Democratic Services could just be alive to that and
yes,
see if they can get him back on.
We're ready for him to try and return.
Yeah, I've told him to rejoin the meeting now.
Great. Okay, that's fabulous. Thanks very much. And do we have Richard Tyler with us yet?
He hasn't arrived as yet.
Okay. Can we email him the link again and keep trying to get him on? Right. Okay. So in the meantime, we'll carrying on. So yeah, thanks, Martin. That was outstanding update. So if we go on to the I think NRW update, and then we'll go on to NE, if that's all right with everyone. So
okay, so I'll pick that up, Alyssa. Hi everyone.
Hi.
So there's a briefing in the pack which is kind of divided between some of the stuff that's going on an all Wales basis, and then there's some stuff in there that's Y specific, so that's down to the local delivery teams. I'm not going to pick out everything from the briefing. I'll just try and pick out some of the headlines. So on an all Wales scale, obviously we've still got the Sac Rivers project that's running across Wales. So that's tackling all of the failing Sac Rivers in Wales, not just the Y, but the Y is benefiting from that project also. So there's a series of headlines that are coming out of that.
Oh.
Take you to that.
Cheyenne, is it just me? I can't hear the.
I've lost sound as well.
Sorry, Anne, we've lost you on sound. Anne, oh, she's got lost completely now. She's going to come back.
She has instant messaged me to say that she's having a problem with.
She's having
signal
problem.
So
yeah.
Let me just pick it up in her stead. Bear with me while I open the right document. That's always the case.
Thanks, David.
So yeah, like Anne was saying, we've got the Sac Rivers project that's got a number of headlines, and those are in the briefing.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, there's still a lot of Welsh Government interest in the Sac Rivers in Wales in their entirety, and there's a summit to be organised for November that NRW will be invited to, that the First Minister chairs. Alongside that, like Anne said, or sorry, like Martin said, we've had sonds out on the Y this summer, and we've got some sort of very, very initial type results from those. Clearly, what we're interested in with that network of sonds is understanding what chlorophyll levels we're having in the river in particular, because we've had those algal blooms in previous years, and clearly we had a period of dry weather this year, and then that was followed by considerable exceptional rainfall through July and August, and it's clearly been a cooler and wetter summer than 2022. So this year's SON data shows less evidence of algal bloom formation compared to last year. So that's the sort of one headline from those SONs. We are installing a telemetry system to work with our sond at Glaisbury. That'll then send that data to a cloud-based server to allow users to view real-time data being collected by the sond. I think that's one of the sort of areas of work we're lagging behind Environment Agency. We haven't got this SON data going out to members of the public real time for them to access and look at it 24/7. So we're doing that. I think as well on the sort of SON side, we've been working with Wyanosk as well to look at where we can help them place sonds in the river. So it's quite a bit of work been done there. Sort of on a local level, bearing in mind, I think that this report sort of includes quite a lot of the July stuff. We have been doing farm inspections across the Y. We've started doing our intensive poultry units visits, but not to the same scale, I'm afraid, as the Environment Agency have been able to achieve. There's some specific incidents that we want to talk about that are in the report. Big manure heap in Talgarth that's been moved, which was directly impacting the Llumby, for instance. And a lot of that information, a lot of the reports that came in about that manure heap were from citizen scientists. So again, we've done a bit of work. I'm not sure it's actually in this, which is a bit disappointing. No, we have. We've written to various science groups on the Y, and we've produced some advice that's available in the document, the links in the document, but also on our website on how we're going to use that information and how they should be reporting it to us. So alongside that, we've had 28 incidents reported within the Y catchment since July. Follow-up work is ongoing on 7 of these, and that may well result in enforcement action. And the message from Anne and I would be to make sure that people are encouraged to report incidents of any kind to our 24-hour incident hotline 0300 065 3000 as soon as possible, so those can be assessed and we can begin our investigations. Okay, thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you.
Sorry, guys. Apologies, my connection.
That's okay, Anne.
Out, and it is back. I'm just going to round off with a couple of other things in addition. So, but thank you, David, for diving in there and being ready. As I know I've got a bit of an iffy connection today. So a couple of other things just worth noting really around poultry permits. So we still have 2 applications sitting with us for expansions to poultry units on the Y catchments. So our policy position at the moment remains that those determinations remain paused while we sort of consider our requirements under environmental permitting regs and under the conservation of habitats and species regs, really around manure management. So that policy position remains that we are not completing the determination of any new permits for poultry units in Wales currently. A couple of other things. We're in the process of, the team is now created for enforcing the new agricultural regulations in Wales. So we've been recruiting a significant number of staff across Wales to enforce those new regulations. And on the Upper Wye restoration project, which a couple of weeks ago we were a little worried about, but those financial worries have now been resolved. So that team will be recruited too. We're expecting to have a team leader in post for that project in the next month, and be sort of ready to start rolling out the activities of that project from the new year. So, and that is it now from NRW. We'll stop.
Thanks, Anne. Councillor Phelps.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to thank both agencies for all their incredible hard work here. You know, we do appreciate it, but I'm still of the opinion that, well, as I boringly point out, I used to do these farm visits, including IPPUs, with the agency for 5 or 6 years. I don't believe that no matter how hard you work, we've got the regulatory framework to crack this nut. I would prefer to see land use management in a nutshell to not allow spreading within the catchment. I know we can't change that here now. I just want to say thank you for your work, but you could double the staff, and I think we're still going to have problems. You know, the diffuse water pollution plan is a great idea, and Project Tara sounds great, but it's still doubling around the edges. We need to stop the spreading in the risky catchment, but we can't because we haven't got the legislation. But when I'm head of land use planning at DEFRA, then that'll change. But you know, until then, we'll have to keep trying. So thank you for listening. Cheers.
Thanks, Councillor. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and thank you for the report, which mentioned the Welsh First Minister's Summit. I think it's the 3rd summit that we're looking forward to in November. I am working with Welsh Government as sort of the coordination link with colleagues from other authorities across the various different NMBs. One of the things that we'll need, and I flagged it to Ross as our executive leadership group representative yesterday, is an update on whereabouts we are on the nutrient management plan. And I will pick up with ELG colleagues potentially what we need, which is, I think this is what happened since the plan was signed off in November 21. This is what we're doing next. And these are the other interesting things that we're doing around the plan. I think it'll need those 3 things, but I'll pick it up offline. I just wanted the board to be aware of that, and any TAG members aware that there's a little taskette coming over the next few weeks, which we'll try not to make a mountain of, but we will need to present a refresh if we don't want to be in the guilty corner with the other NMBs pushing on.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do want to make sure that we're well prepared for the summit. So I think that's a good point. Thank you. Councillor Bickerton.
Thank you. Just 2 points, really. Can I go back to NRW? And David, just a point about the incidents. You said there have been 28 incidents and you're following through on 7. I just want to understand a bit about the process for that. Is that a prioritisation, those 28, or is it just a case of working through them? And just my second point, these links in the report couldn't click through to because I hadn't got the right permissions. So if somebody could give me those permissions for the citizen science paper, which I don't think is on the public website, and I just mentioned throw that in while I've got the stage basically. But just a bit more about the process of those 28 would be good.
Okay, I'll pick that up. Just regarding the link, first of all, I'll bring that back to my organisation here and see what we can do with this. Something's happened to that link that means it's not sharing that stuff externally. And just regarding incidents, so of those 28, so we will have attended each of those. We would have made an assessment of those incidents. Not all of them would have been substantiated, so we would have maybe gone out to some of them, and those, you know, and you know, whatever was reported might not have been evident when we were present on the site. So a number of them will initially have been, you know, attended and disregarded because there was no evidence of anything happening. Some of them would have been low level, so they would have been dealt with there and then, and it would have just been a case of asking somebody to do something or rectify something or stop doing something, and it would have been, you know, a minor issue. So I guess, you know, it's only those that require the longer follow-ups that are still ongoing, because, you know, it's a bigger piece of work to remediate. Or that there may be investigations ongoing as well, sort of formal investigations on some of them. Does that help?
Thank you. Thanks, Anne. Councillor Charlton.
Thank you very much, Elisa. It's good to see you, Anne. And just to ask a little bit more about, you said there were 2 applications for IPUs that have been on pause. I'm sure there are more than just 2 applications. Is that 2 recent applications, or is that added to the backlog that we know that there is with Welsh Government?
So this is a different issue. So I'm talking about the permitting process rather than the planning process. So there are a number held up in the planning process, but obviously that's a planning matter. So I'm just talking about those that are held up in the permitting process. That's an RW's remit.
Okay, thanks then. Because do you know how many? Because I think we've got maybe 2 or 3 just for Powys.
In the planning process?
Yes.
I don't know offhand, I'm afraid now. So I can find out, Councillor.
Okay. If Peter Morris is on the call, I'm not sure he is. He might be able to just update me on that one.
I think Ethan's on the call from Powys, Councillor.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it'll be picked up. But yeah, thank you.
Do you want me to answer that? Sorry.
Well, yeah, Ethan, if you can, that would be great.
Yeah, as far as I know, we have 13 applications with Welsh Government on holding direction at the moment. I think that's about all there is to say on that at the moment.
Okay.
Thank you, Ethan. That is really, really important information for me, because it gives you an indicator of what we're actually looking at in Powys alone. That's just Powys. So, you know, this is a major, major issue that I think we just need to keep an eye on. I think that's why I asked the question, because I might not have heard everything that you said, Anne, but when you said 2 applications, I thought, I'm sure there's more than that. So that's shocked me as well. Thanks, Ethan.
Yeah, we've got 3 in Wales in total, but two out of those 3 are on the Y. 1 is up in Gwynedd.
Okay, so the permits, Anne, are they for IPUs already built, or are they for...
They're expansions, so they're existing IPUs. I think one of them is permitted, one of them isn't, because one of them is below threshold, so it would take it above threshold. So some of them are operating, but they're operating either below threshold or they're operating at a smaller number with a permit.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the link, David. Very useful link in the chat, which is the summary of the applications being held by the Welsh Government. Because actually, I think Councillor Charlton's right to raise that, and it would be useful to have a line of sight on what the scale of that is. So thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, except it doesn't work. All right, well, we'll keep working on it, David, so you can get one that does work. Thank you. Simon.
Just quickly for Dave, I think mentioned it, but also for Anne, 7 incidents in 2 months that required follow-up seems higher than normal. Is that because we haven't seen them before, or is that a genuine increase in the number of incidents that require following up?
I don't think that's higher than normal. I guess perhaps for the Y it might be. I would need to have a look at those trends, Simon, to be honest, and we do map all of that. So, okay. I mean, for us, it's good that these incidents are being reported in. You know, that's you know, when we would always encourage people to report those incidents into us, so we can, you know, understand, get a better feel for what's going on the ground. Maybe on reflection it's a slight trend, but we'll have a look at our trends and our data on incidents, and yeah, we can come back to you. Don't know offhand, sorry.
Thanks, Anne. Mary.
This is probably a really daft question, but when you talk about incidents, either the EA or NRW, do you mean they're like a one-off thing that's happened, or is it something that is permanently wrong that could be changed and therefore could be quantified as a betterment? Or is it like somebody did something once, somebody reported it, you go and look, say you shouldn't do that, and then they don't do it again, but it's not something you can capture?
So what we receive reports of what we call incidents from, usually from members of the public who spot something or see something when they're out and about that doesn't look right. So those incidents can be anything. They can be pollution, they can be fires, they can be road traffic collisions that might cause an issue or a pollution somewhere. They can be any number of things, but they get reported in on that 24-hour line or 24-hour number that both Environment Agency and NRW has got, and that's what that's what we class as an incident. It's something that's reported into us that requires us to assess to determine what our response is going to be. So an incident's a one-off, and then a non-compliance event would be something that was kind of more strategic with on a farm, for example. So a non-compliance, so if we're going out and doing compliance checks, or we're out doing some visits of a sector that we regulate, and we find something during that visit that isn't compliant with the permit or the legislation, that doesn't necessarily class as an incident. So that's part of our ongoing regulatory work as opposed to our instant response work. Okay. I mean, these are all, it's all good things. It's just obviously relying on members of the public to know the difference between a one-off incident, a non-compliance event, or something that's not within somebody's permit that they've actually never seen the permit of. It's really hard to know then which of those things we can repair to then provide catchment improvement. I can see that incidents would stop something maybe getting worse or happening, but they're not things that we can kind of rely on with regard to repair. A non-compliance could generate an incident, could generate a discharge, an unauthorized discharge into a river. So, so if we've gone out to an industrial unit or an agricultural unit and we've seen a non-compliance, and as a result of that non-compliance, there is a discharge going out, then, there is a pollution instance as a result of that discharge. But it's slightly different from that route that we receive in from members of the public. I'm assuming, Martin, you're happy with that?
So it's very, very much the same actually for the EA. And just for clarity, for example, say you saw a farmer that was plowing really close to the river, or you saw soil loss leaving agricultural land, that would be an incident. So that type of information that is helpful to receive, and I'm sure it's the same with Anne, because actually they are incidents in their own rights. That's different to where we're going around farms and doing our routine inspection work, where we're identifying the issues ourselves. So anything which looks like bad practice, happy to receive it, and we can target them as part of our inspection work or a standalone incident response to that event.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks, Martin. And good stuff. Natural England update.
Hi, Alyssa. Yeah, I'll cover this initially.
Okay.
So we've concentrated on our catchment sensitive farm advice for our update this time. So to date this year, we've done 132 one-to-one farm visits with landowners across the Wye and Lug catchment. We've done a number of events. You can all read the report, so I won't go through it in detail, but overall we've done significant amounts of engagement and recommended over 700 measures, and the biggest measure we've recommended is all around soil management, which obviously, as we all know, absolutely key to improving condition of the Wye. So we've done that to date, and obviously they've been working really hard all over the summer, completing those visits and doing those events, and some of them we've had really, really good engagement at the events as well. I think especially the potato event, which we did jointly with WWOOF and other partners, we made some really, really good impacts there. So collaborative working really well, and that engagement working really effectively. We've also, in terms of then sort of proactive work, Martin talked about his EA campaign, and obviously we work closely with the EA in terms of that very targeted 2-day campaign to ensure that we were there for any advice follow-up needed in those farms. Obviously EA do the enforcement, but we can do advice. So if they noted any farms that needed advice, we can follow up on that, and we'll continue to work closely with the EA and others in that regard to make sure we're always maximising both of our efforts. And then we're shortly to start, just started a real proactive campaign targeting every farm adjacent to the river on both the Wye and the Lug, and especially looking at those farms that we haven't had previous engagement with, to really target, because we feel now, you know, the increased publicity around the Wye, current new potential funding opportunities. Now's the time to maybe revisit some of those farmers for which our previous advice or previous grants, to be honest, wouldn't have kind of had an impact, and they wouldn't have been interested. So we're starting that. It's going to be 160 holdings. Again, obviously we've made sure we've informed partners, so we're you know, not treading on any toes, and making sure we're again maximising the opportunities for sort of joint messaging along that. So we're starting on that campaign now, and also finally they're working with the partnership campaign with Farm Hereford to carry out those 12 farmer events across the catchment. So we'll carry on with that campaign and those efforts across the Wye. Happy to take any questions.
Can I add something, Claire? Emma,
yes.
Emma here also can actually.
Go for it, Emma.
Yeah, I think that's a very encouraging response that we've had. I mean, most people on the call will know that farmers are facing huge uncertainty, perhaps ever since they ever have done since the Second World War, in terms of the schemes and the subsidies that are available. So we know we know most of what the sustainable farming incentive will be, which is mainly replacing basic payment scheme. But we still don't have clarity around the other two bits, which the other two tiers were the ones we really want to be using to bring about landscape scale on top of better soil management. So I don't know if there's going to be a hiatus or whether people continue to want to take our advice, but I would really welcome members of this board, John, for you, please, if you have contacts in the farming community. Obviously, we only work in England, we don't work in Wales, but if you can promote the free advice that we are able to give through your networks, that would be really valued. Thank you very much.
Good point. Thanks, Emma. Yeah, I mean, I think again, the point that Claire was making about the opportunity for every visit to identify multiple things that can happen and different streams of funding for that farmer, would, you know, that's the real opportunity of being on the farm and giving that advice. So brilliant.
Absolutely.
Job.
Yeah, and that's a really important point as well. And we're making sure we're investing in obviously training our staff to ensure that they know all those opportunities. It's complex. Then we've got biodiversity net gain coming. You know, we've got all these new. So we're investing quite a lot to ensure that you know the staff are trained.
It's very complicated.
Yeah, to be able to answer those questions and signpost really effectively, because like Emma said, you know, it's unprecedented times, and we need to ensure that the advice we're giving absolutely maximises.
I mean, we're in the early days of transitioning to a completely new economy here, and it's you know, it's very difficult all round. But at the same time, there's fabulous opportunities, and that starts with that visit. Yeah. So really great that you're doing so much of that. And what I was just wanted to pull out of your report, and I know it's really, really difficult. This is something that the board has struggled with, you know, ever since its inception, which is how do you quantify the impact of catchment sensitive farming? But you're making a stab at it, and I think in this sense we can say, well, there's an envelope of potentiality, or there's an envelope of reasonableness around the percentages there, which I think is important, because we can't just say there's nothing. We can't just lose it. It's too important. So we've got the estimate of the in-river load reducing by 2 to 3% with the greatest reduction at the Worm Brook. That you know, that makes me happy. I'm like, brilliant. We know it might not be like down to the last umpty squiddly bit, but it's trying to capture something that's really hard to capture. So, you know, well done. And the other point I wanted to just say was the comment in the report about since 2019 there's been an increase equal to 26% in the farmland for being, you know, visited and receiving advice. 26%, it's an enormous amount of land. So that's, you know, brilliant. which it's, I think, we're doing more, we're covering a wider area, and we're starting to sort of capture the result, what we might be seeing at the end of it. And I think all of that is putting us in really good stead, along with the these kind of emerging and complex conversations around different funding streams coming in. So yeah, really, really good. Councillor Bickerton.
Yeah, it's a really interesting report from Natural England, but I was just wondering, where do we get the intelligence on the Welsh side? Is it through Farming Connect? And I just wonder where the report is in terms of possible implications of sustainable farming scheme, and on the Welsh advice. And as I say, is that Farming Connect? Perhaps people on the call could actually advise on that, because I think that Natural England paper is really good and gives us an all-rounded picture, and it just needs balancing our side of the border. And I'm not a councillor, because I'm a Welsh Government appointee to the park, so just call me Liz.
Yeah, so I'll need NRW to pick up that.
Yes, I understand that. Yes, somebody from the Welsh side who.
Yeah, I mean it's a really good point, Liz. There is a new sustainable farming scheme that's kind of in the making, isn't there, here in Wales? Maybe what we can commit to do is kind of bringing you as much as we can on that at the next meeting, because it's a moving sort of feast at the moment, and I think I'm not as fully in the loop on that as maybe I could be. So I'd need to go away and ask a couple of questions, and maybe I can include something next time.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea, and so someone can minute that or capture that as an agenda item or action for the next meeting, that we will have some focus on the sort of equivalence within Wales for catchment sensitive farming. And I think there's also some development coming over with the Farm Cymru thing, as well as Farming Connect. So kind of an understanding of all that would be useful. Emma?
Yeah, sorry, on my phone, I haven't quite worked out how to raise my hand on the screen.
Right, waving is great, I can see that.
The other thing that we didn't put in the update, but you might want to talk about at a future board, and this was probably for the Herefordshire Council to lead on, is also, of course, the development of the local nature recovery strategy. And you'll probably know more about the Herefordshire one than I do, Alyssa, but just how that may play into this. So it's something for future.
Absolutely, quite right.
Okay.
Yeah, that will need to be something for a future agenda. Okay, good. Right, and has Richard Tyler appeared? Do we have any update on where he's got to?
Chair, we've had a question sent through as an email. Richard Tyler was unable to attend the meeting, so I'll just read this aloud.
Right.
He asks whether the NMB or other name will meet to discuss proposals being made by the ESG before or after they have been implemented. So does NMB meet before ESG has considered such proposals so that we can comment on them as proposals, or do we meet after ESG has discussed and agreed them? If the NMB can only discuss things that have had formal decisions made, this cannot be called consultation.
All right, I think that's an interesting question. With everyone's agreement, can we hold that over for the governance discussion, and rather than trying to answer it now before we've had the discussion? So everyone's in agreement with that. Okay, good, cool. Next thing we've got, we sent out an email just to confirm voting membership. We haven't had any corrections back in, so is everyone happy with that list? Happy to jog through it if you need me to. All right, okay, we're all okay with that. Claire?
Sorry, Chair, I'm too fumbling with hands. I think we were going to give an update. There was one other update that I think Emma was going to give that Ross had spoken to you about, which was the update from the conversation that local authorities and environmental partners and Welsh Water have been having. Yeah.
Okay, does that impact this bit? Because we I thought I'd just get this bit out of the way and then we go on to governance.
Do you want to do it onto the governance bit?
We can do it there. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, but can we just agree? Because I mean, basically, on the if there's a possibility at some point in this meeting we have to be clear about who's got voting and who hasn't. That's why we sent out the email to say this is our understanding of who's got voting rights currently. So is that
I think it's fine to do it then, Alyssa. It's not something that needs voting on, but
no. But I just wanted that clarity before we go into the rest of the discussion. So if we're all broadly happy with that, that's fine. We can go on with that and get on to the riverwide governance proposal. So Claire, I'm just going to say, however you just go for it and bring the update in as and when you choose. It's fine. So I'll pass over.
Claire, shall I keep up on the update?
I think that might be helpful because it's not something to be voted on, and I'll make the distinction when we come to the proposals to try and explain that.
Okay. So what existed in a rather loose relationship was that the executive officers of the local authorities, including the national park, have been obviously communicating and meeting on an informal basis for a while. The tag had somewhat hit a bit of a slump at the moment with no coordinator in there. So the what was loosely called the executive leadership group, which comprises officers from the councils both in Wales and England, and I'm going to get this wrong, but Brino Bracariog, the National Park, and Welsh Water, met on Monday. So these are a group of people who from the statutory organisations, and they have statutory responsibilities. So we've decided to formalise the working arrangement that I've just described, and through a formation of a river-wide statutory officers group, RWSOG, if you see that in future. So we agreed a name. Hopefully people are comfortable with that. In terms of relating to the terms of reference that have been circulating for a while, and the subgroup that have met twice, which Claire will follow up on in a minute, that statutory officers group will take ownership of the nutrient management plan and work using the powers and resources that we have. So those things that we have, but obviously things that we don't have, to improve the catchment conditions. But again, that's within the remit of our powers and responsibilities and resources. We want to work hand in hand with this board so that this board can influence, advise and challenge on the content and the delivery of the nutrient management plan. Now, in order for that nutrient management plan to have traction and deliver a quality improvement to the river, there's a lot of technical, a lot of evidence and ideas that need to be chewed through. And this is where the technical advisory group comes in. So the statutory group of officers group will be clearly commissioning that group on priority work and providing resources to help to make sure that that tag group operates. And then finally, but probably most importantly, we talked about how we communicate decisions, progress, and how we do that openly and transparently with the public, as well as through the Nutrient Management Board. So in future, we'd like to get in the pattern of being able to share, not having to wait to come to the Nutrient Management Board, but being able to share more widely what the outcome of those meetings were. We're going to finalise, I should say, and make public our terms of reference and ways of working. And this will part be in sort of shaped by the discussions we're about to have about the Nutrient Management Board. I don't know if any of those folk on that meeting on Monday would like to add anything to that. Have I missed anything?
No, apparently not. Right, okay. So no one's got anything else on that. That's great. Thanks, Emma. Claire, do you want to go on with the?
No, I think we just wanted to give an update. Apologies, I thought this had been agreed to beforehand. So we're happy to carry on with the voting and then go on to talk about the proposals. I agree with you. I think we need to be clear on the the voting element first.
Okay. So you had you would have had a list emailed. I think
I don't.
Tom said he didn't get the list, but okay. Shall I just go through it verbally and then?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. So what I've got down is Anne Weedy, Clemnet, Catherine Maybe, Alyssa Swinglehurst, Jackie Charlton, Sid Phelps, Liz Bickerton, Georgie Hyde, Helen Dale, Jamie Audsley, Jenny Grubb, Martin Quine, Martin Williams, Mary Albright, Simon Evans.
Okay, so I think Natural England would like to stand down from being a voting member because we see the Nutrient Management Board as a group of stakeholders coming together. And I think in our statutory role, we're there to observe and listen, but not actually to influence that. So Natural England would like to stand down as a voting member on the board.
Okie dokie. I mean, I think what this list was supposed to capture was what is the current understanding.
Yeah. Okay.
But so we may then come on to discuss during governance discussions.
Okay.
How we might want to change it, and that's fine. Because I think there's a proposal as well to do away with it altogether, and that's another way of looking at it. But I thought before we change everything, I want to know exactly what we've got, since that always seems to be the conversation. Hi Martin, how are you?
I'm very well. I think I should probably not be a voting member, as I represent other members within Farm Herefordshire who are individually voters. So my opinion matters not, because they already have one.
Okay. Alrighty. And Mary?
Just to clarify for people that are watching, the list you just gave, those are the current members of the Nutrient Management Board that have voting rights. What Annie were talking about earlier is a revised structure to replace that board, and you're calling it the Riverwise Statutory Officers Group rather than No.
So this is the voting.
No, sorry. I mean that group of statutory officers is going to be going to be the new name for the executive leadership group.
Yeah.
Yes. So people will be getting confused now. So we need to explain there's a three sections. You're going to have your statutory officers group, your tag, and the Nutrient Management Board, which relates to those voting members you just listed. Is that right?
Yeah. That's my understanding. Claire.
So I'm going to very briefly and invite others to walk us through that proposal and be clear on that in a minute, Mary.
Yeah.
I think all Alyssa you're trying to do at the moment is be clear for this meeting.
Yes.
Based on the previous arrangements for the board, who has voting rights or not. So it's not in relation to the other bits.
Yeah. So that's where
that's what I understand you're trying to do.
That's what I'm trying to do. Quite right.
So technically Martin should have a vote because we haven't voted on Martin having a vote.
But I've nevertheless made a note of his comments, and that's something that I think we will return to as we discuss governance.
And also we just need to kind of recognise that we do have a weighted Welsh contingent. That's not a problem for me. I'm more than half Welsh, but don't get me wrong, no problem. But you just have to kind of notify the fact that currently the voting is a lot of Welsh councillors compared to one Herefordshire councillor. Because you have different.
Councillor Phelps.
You have different positions on development and on mitigation, so you kind of have a voting issue there.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary. Alrighty. That's all one river. Okay, Claire.
Thank you. Right. Okay. So I'm going to try and walk us through what we've got and where we've come from, but I'm also going to be really clear that we haven't got consensus on this. This is for conversation with the Nutrient Management Board. So I will invite those that have been in the discussions to add to that as well, and then hand back to you for conversation and working it forward, Alyssa, if that's okay. I think it's probably also worth addressing Richard's question right up front, that the whole point of this is a proposal to come to this group for discussion, for agreement on how we go forward. It is not about trying to say that something is done. Within that, there are some things where we have tried to be clear on the various different remits and responsibilities, and I will make that bit clear as well, because that may feel confusing if we don't make that distinction. So there are three parts to what is put forward in the papers. So the pack I'm going to refer to, just to be really clear for those who might be watching this back as well as those who are following, is the public pack document that we've got. And it is the slides that begin at page 13 in the pack. So the three parts are pages 14 and 15 are trying to very concisely summarise why collectively we agreed that we needed to do some work on the governance, and then to set out the principles about how all of us wanted to work, no matter our position within this. So it talks about collaboration, transparency, cross-border. And those are things that everybody who, certainly I've been involved in conversations with, is absolutely committed to. We have also within that had conversations about the distinction between the statutory agencies and stakeholders, and the references to the board, which on that slide 15 talk about that board being able to influence, being able to advise, and being able to challenge, are in reference to the stakeholders as opposed to the statutory agencies themselves. Slides 16 to 18 are effectively the precursor to what Emma's just explained. So they're not a proposal, they're not a change, actually, they are clarity on the way that those who have got legal remits to work within the catchment on the things that affect the water quality within the catchment, the way that we're working together, and the way that we're making decisions about either legal duties or the resources that we've got, and the variety of different things that we need to deliver within there. That hasn't changed, but it was really clear that there was confusion about where some of that was. So we wanted to formalise that and be really open with everybody about how that is happening. And that update that Emma just gave us is from what in those slides is referred to as the executive statutory group, but we'd had feedback from people about the naming and about how that felt and how it landed, and hence we decided to call it the River Wye Statutory Officers Group. So that is, just for the avoidance of doubt, the same thing. Then slides, the remaining slides, so that is from 19 onwards, are the proposals that we're putting forward for discussion. They have come from conversations within members of the Nutrient Management Board. Not all have been able to join, not all have chosen to join, and in the very last iteration we did specifically take a subgroup of those come together. But it is that group that has put this forward. I think it's important to recognise that we've agreed to put this proposal forward, but not everybody is in the same position on whether they think this is the final version, the right version, whether they think this is the way we go forward. So there will be outstanding concerns that people will want to raise, and there will be outstanding questions there, and I'll come to that in a minute. What we did talk about, which is on slide 21 under the terms of reference, and these are not intended to be full terms of reference, they are an outline for today, is exactly as I said at the top of this, that the aim of that board would be for stakeholders to come together across the catchment and have the ability to influence the decisions and actions that have an impact either directly or indirectly within a catchment, to advise what we're now calling the River Wye statutory officers group on their proposals, plans, decisions and actions, and also to challenge them on those and on the delivery of those. So the last one of those slides, 22, outlines the things that we don't have agreement on. The first, it may feel inconsequential. It's put there as the name, but actually it's about making sure that the name reflects what the remit of the group is, so that we don't end up with different expectations about what the group can do and what the group is aiming to be. The second was about the membership, which is partly the voting issue that we've just been talking about, but also about the engagement with wider groups within the catchment. And then the last is about the chairing of the group. So Alyssa, perhaps first, if I can open to colleagues who might want to add something different or a nuance or correct something, and then open up for discussion.
Yep, that's fine. I was just wondering if it'd be worth sharing those slides on the. Here we go. That's coming. Just so that we can hold them in our consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So if we get down to the bits for discussion, what did you say is page 20?
Yeah, 21 and 22 are probably the most important ones.
21 and 22. Okay, so it gives a chance to.
Didn't know if I'd misunderstood, but the copy that's been uploaded to the site has 10 slides.
Yeah, me too. Sorry.
Okay. For different ones, I think I couldn't find that one on there, which was why I went to the public pack. So apologies. It's the last two in the pack is what I'm talking about.
Councillor Swinghurst, would you like me to go down to the bottom of this page? Or is
Yeah,
this...
you're going to get to the last two pages, page 8.
Okay.
9 and 10. Is it 9? Okay, 9. Go with them. One more.
Yeah.
No, the last two slides.
That's it. Keep going. That's the Johnny. That's the one. Outstanding issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that okay, Claire?
That's perfect. That's where I was going to leave it for others to come in.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Right, has anybody else got anything that they want to add to that? Who are involved in the conversations? And actually, I'm just going to say thank you to the, those people who put in all that extra time and effort to work on this between the meetings. It's appreciated. I think you can tell from the maturity and complexity of the proposal that this has taken some time to develop. So thank you all for doing that. Right, but has anyone got anything to add or anything that they feel that's been missed out? Catherine.
Oh, just to say, I'm pleased with the change on the name of the statutory officers group. Much more comfortable with that. That's great. And my view on the board was to keep it as board. I just felt it was an unnecessary change, which implies some loss of status, which I would prefer not to see. But also that I think in other parts of the structure in Wales, it's board. So I can't see a real benefit in distinguishing it and making it something different. I remain to be convinced about that. So I'd be more comfortable with keeping it as board. And on the voting, should we have voting? And I personally would rather see that it's not a two-tier group that everyone has voting rights, but should the decision be made to have limited voting, I think it would be wrong to have the representation of some commercial or special interest groups and not others. So it would need to be a more balanced group. If there was voting. So, for example, farming and not tourism, for example, others with an interest in the river. So that was just a bit of input from me, but hopefully we don't have to go down that road of restricting it. And also on the chairing, I'm afraid that in terms of my own workload, I realised that should we do a rotating chair, I'm really not in a position to offer that from my local authority now. Things have changed, so just to apologise in case that becomes part of the discussion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Charlton.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to Claire for pulling all this together, because she really was really helpful to us in just drawing our thoughts and ideas. And, you know, there were some tensions there, but I think they were good tensions. And I hope everybody feels the way that I did, that actually we worked very well together and we did overcome some of those problems that we had. And there were a lot more than this. So what we've come down to here are just three really things which at the end of the day, it'd be nice to have more collaboration on coming to a consensus on this. I'm the same as Catherine, so I'm on the same place as Catherine. I don't think we need to change the name of this. I thought very carefully about forum and assembly, and the forum suggest something which is just a group of people who come together and talk. That's what a forum is. That's not what we're proposing here. And so I think it would be wrong to call it a forum. I also thought very carefully about assembly. And we have a lot of discussion and talk now around community assemblies or other assemblies where you come together over one particular issue and you thrash that out in different ways and come to a conclusion and a decision at the end of it. Again, that doesn't reflect to me what we have here. So I'm very content to stay with board. I think it's something we're already used to. I think the members of the public are used to that as well. And I think what we saw in Richard's question, I'm not sure I heard all of it that you said, Alyssa, I missed some of it, but I think the gist of it was that he felt that this was a public forum, or it was a public area for people to engage with, listen to, and perhaps contribute when they can. And again, I think, you know, if we change what we've got here, it will confuse. And I think, you know, that would be a good reason for keeping it. I don't really have much of an issue with membership and voting. If we're going to call people members of the Nutrient Management Board, then if they're members, they should have a voting right. If they're visitors or contributing in some other way, then they don't have a voting right. And there may be reasons for voting. There may be something that comes up where we feel it's important to have a vote for whatever reason. So I don't think we should just discard it, but I do think we need to think carefully in our terms of reference what we mean by membership. And chairing, I think Alyssa has done a fantastic job over a good number of years, and I'm in a very similar position to Catherine. I would find it really difficult to find the capacity to do justice to chairing the board. It does take a lot of time. It may get easier, and if it does get easier, then, you know, I'll hold my hand up and say yes. You know, I'll certainly give my time and commitment to this. I'm totally committed to it. I do think it's really important what we're doing here around the why in both Wales and in England, and I'm also totally committed to that cross-border partnership working, and I think we need to find a way of ensuring that continues. We do have 4 councillors. I'm not sure who said it. Do we have the right? I think it was Mary. So we have 2 from England and 2 from Wales. So it is quite balanced, I think. And of course, Catherine and I represent 2 different authorities, as do Alyssa and I've forgotten. Yes, Sid. I was trying to think. I was going to call you Greg, and I knew you weren't Greg. And I think it's the Helly bit on your name that was confusing me. Yes, so there is some scope there to sort of rotate that, and I think at some point in the future it will be a good idea to rotate that. And so I'm very happy to come to that conclusion in the end if that's what we want to do. I think that's all I want to say. But just to say a big thank you to Claire, because I did come in here very tense, Claire. I started off feeling really disgruntled, and I think I genuinely think we've overcome that through collaboration, through working together and listening as well, which has been crucial to this. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Charlton. Yeah, I mean, for me, the name issue, it's kind of, it will put us out of alignment with all the other nutrient management boards that are nutrient management boards. Although I do take on absolutely on board the point that it's important that it's clear that what the parameters of the authority of the board are. But I think probably if we can just make that really abundantly clear, then we don't need to change the name. And that would be my take on that, because I think otherwise we'll just confuse everyone a bit more. Happy with the River Wye Statutory Officers Group. I think that sounds like a good and clear and accurate description. I'm slightly in two minds about membership. Kind of instinctively, I think, yeah, let everyone come in. But that it may get a bit unmanageable at that point. So I think there does need to be some constraint on membership. But I'm happy with the proposed membership, which includes representatives from the campaign groups, and I would love to see the river represented along the principle of rights for nature, that actually the river by and of itself should have a voice on this board. So that seems to me to be very positive, and I can totally live with that. The voting issue every now and then, mainly not. I think that there's a little conundrum here which I haven't entirely unpicked, which is who is the decision taker. So if the statutory officers group is not a decision taker as a group, although the individuals upon that group can make decisions on behalf of their agencies, obviously, and local authorities. And the Nutrient Management Board is not a decision taker. But we have, for instance, De Cymru, hi Jenny, who in their paper were saying that they would be looking to nutrient management boards to make a decision on their behalf quite correctly over the proportionality of benefits to the river versus reduction at sewage treatment works for wetlands, as an example. So that would be a decision which needs to be taken by someone. And Welsh Water are quite right, they can't make that decision. So who would make that decision in the scenario that we're looking at is just a kind of a question. And if no one's taking a decision, then how does accountability work? Fair.
So I'm not going to answer that specific one, particularly because of the link to Wales, but I am going to explain try and explain the conversation that we've had in here. And I think I'm going to start by recognising that the answer will feel to some potentially woolly and frustrating, but it is the way that our regulations and our law and our remits of our organisations work. And I am really in favour of us being clear about that, being honest about how we will work our way through it, rather than trying to give an answer which is more palatable. And I think what we discussed at the Statutory Officers Group is that the decisions have to be made by the individual organisations who've got the legal accountability for that particular thing. So in my case, if I have to make a decision that I'm not comfortable making with the powers that are delegated to me, I will go back and I will ratify that through the Environment Agency. For local authority officers, they will do that through their elected members. What we want to do through the Statutory Officers Group is to be able to have some conversations that might be difficult because of finances, because of confidence around decisions that are being made by others, politicians or whatever, have those conversations in a way that allows us to be really clear on what the consequences are, to then go away and take all of that information into the places in our own individual organisations where the decisions are. Those decisions will then come into the nutrient management plan, which that Statutory Officers Group will own collectively. And we will come to the Nutrient Management Board and hear what the Nutrient Management Board say, so we can take that into account back through that process that I've talked about, but also so that the Nutrient Management Board can challenge and can advise on that, and that will be a matter of public record. So the decisions still sit with the individual legal entities, unless they are about things that the stakeholder collective under the Nutrient Management Board chooses to do or to say in order to influence those decisions independently on their own. That's my take on it, Alyssa.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Claire. Rachel.
Thanks, Chair. I think your question on wetlands actually raises the point that Claire Dennis is trying to illustrate, because you've got Welsh Water who will do some analysis of their sewage treatment plants about what can be improved, and that will produce some factual information. There's then a discussion with the Environment Agency around the whole of the AMP requirements and the permitting requirements, and that goes backwards and forwards, and those are quite important and quite separate decisions. There's then a discussion with Natural England about what is needed to improve the river. And if there is a decision on how much is reserved for betterment and how much is given for mitigation, that actually affects the council business case, because we're taking the risk in building a wetland and we're inviting developers to pay for that wetland, including the river betterment element of it. So it might be that independently, agencies take decisions about what is best for the river in terms of mitigation, in terms of river betterment, and it might then leave the council with a positive business case, in which case we'd want to go ahead, or it might need it with a negative business case, in which case we'd probably have to come back and have another conversation. So I think it's important to recognise our different roles, but at least with an executive leadership group, I think we're actually in a stronger place, or whatever it's called now, I didn't quite get the note of it. We're actually in a stronger place to get those discussions into a proper flow and actually sequence them in a way that we can understand ourselves and explain to the public. I hope that helps.
Thanks. Helen.
Thank you. I think I just wanted to say thank you to those people who've been in those conversations, because they've obviously been really difficult conversations to get to some kind of consensus. I'll just kind of summarise where I'm at, and I don't know if any of it will provide any kind of clarity really. The executive group I think sounds great. The name board, initially at the start of this conversation I was all for changing it, but having heard what others have said, I mean, it's not something I feel particularly strongly about. I like the idea. What I think has changed since we've started these conversations, I think we've changed the way that we interact with each other. I think we've started to become more collaborative. And I think historically we've been a bit more combative, is not quite the right word, but so I think just having these conversations has changed our approach to how we deal with each other. So on that basis, I'm kind of, I'm easy either way about the name board. In terms of voting, I think the only time we voted, I can remember one time we took a vote and I felt uncomfortable because I voted against the decision. So it left me feeling like my organisation wasn't represented. And I think this is about reaching consensus. Voting, I don't see voting and consensus in the same sentence. So I'm kind of, not entirely comfortable with us having a voting role. And then in terms of chair, I think it's the role of the chair is there to build that consensus.
Thanks, Helen. Tom?
I suspect Jenny might be coming in on the conversation that was going on with Rachel and Claire, so I'll let Jenny go and then come back to me, if that's okay.
Jenny?
It's fine, Tom. I'm happy to come in after. I'm sure you've got lots of interesting things to say.
Okay, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to give our support to your comment before, Alyssa, on exploring options for giving the river or nature a voice on the board. That would be something that we would be very keen to see happen and help work through.
Great, thanks, Tom. Jenny.
Lovely, thank you. It was just a couple of points, and I'd like to touch on the sort of voting issue as well. Just to be clear, when we talk about the proportion that we set aside for river betterment of these schemes, when we discuss wetlands and what we were talking about with Rachel, it is set out exactly what the water company needs to do to meet their fair share of removal within the river. That is completely set, and we will go away and do that portion of the work. What we were discussing is where there are additional measures that can be done above and beyond what is the water industry's responsibility, how that fits into what can be used for offsetting purposes, for mitigation for housing, and what should go towards the betterment of the river. Ultimately, so Rachel's exactly right. How much of that proportion goes to the river and how much goes for housing will affect the cost benefit of whether that scheme goes ahead for the local authority, because they do have to build it. Ultimately, though, that decision sits with the permitting authority. So if NRW will allow us to, to discharge from a wetlands into the river, they will decide the permitting criteria of that. What I think we were asking for is consultation with this forum about, in each specific scenario, whether it was worth offsetting slightly less in one location because it makes a better business case and therefore it's more likely to go ahead, or whether no, you need to do a larger proportion for the betterment of the river there, even if it means it's no longer cost beneficial. So I think it was a sort of a consultation piece, because ultimately NRW or EA will decide whether that project goes ahead based on the permitting criteria. The only other thing then I thought was, should we float the idea then of perhaps keeping the voting, but those who are on the statutory operators group don't get a vote? So if we are bringing proposals forward and plans forward saying these are our legal duties, we have to do this, what do you think about this as a consultation forum, then perhaps we should, it's an idea. I'm not saying I don't think I've thought it through enough yet, but perhaps keeping the voting so that we can use it as a consultation forum and a consultation platform, but removing votes from those who are offering the work, as it were.
Okay. Yeah,
Does that make sense?
I mean, in my experience of the board over a few years now is voting is something that happens very rarely. So, by and large, it's probably a bit irrelevant, but every now and then it isn't. But mainly our discussions work towards consensus. So I'm sort of not massively troubled by it, other than I think we probably should just agree who can vote in the event that we have to vote, but we don't. As a sort of, but every now and then we might. I don't know if there's something that's really contentious, then we might. It just seems that not to have the ability at all would probably be unwise. I think, Jenny, you're probably right about not duplicating. If we're looking at recommendations coming from the statutory officer group, then the statutory officer group cannot have an opinion on that. They would present that as a recommendation, as it were, and then we would comment and give advice or whatever, and that makes sense. And if we have a kind of a huge split in what we think about a recommendation, then it may be possible then to actually say where it's the majority here.
Melissa, sorry, got my virtual hand up, Emma.
Sorry, Emma.
Sorry. Yeah, so I think if the group want to proceed with voting, even if you only use it very, very rarely, I don't think a two-tier system feels very, we had talk about the noble principles, democracy, second-class citizens, I just doesn't feel comfortable with me, even though I would want a voting right. And the second thing I just wanted to say was coming back to one of the purposes of the board. I think one of the things for me is that the technical advice groups may come up with options or ideas that are run through the steering group and think, okay, that one might be difficult, but getting the river fixed is going to be compromises in lots of different sectors. So I would see the board as well as you helping to perhaps for us to make those difficult decisions where they're within our gift. But then you get behind those and say, okay, we've talked about the difficulty, the complexity here. And although, and for the good of the river, we are behind this, and to have that with the stakeholders as well. And I'm not quite sure if that comes through in terms of reference. It's a bit long-winded way of saying it, but it's also about the board saying, that was a difficult decision that had to be made. But we can see that for the greater good of the river, it's the right thing to do.
Thanks, Emma, for the clarification. Very helpful clarification. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Just a thought on the voting discussion is that for those of us who sit within an organisation who have elected members, that the impact of Jenny's suggestion is different in that if I I've forgotten what the S stands for, the officers group. If I from the officers group bring a proposal to our table, then that's almost certainly been signed off by my member or our members. And for it to then come to the board, is it me that doesn't have a vote, or is it us organisationally that doesn't have a vote? And that potentially takes quite a big chunk out of those who could vote on an issue, which I suspect could add some bias to the results of votes. So it just gets a bit messy and complicated.
I think it would be the members of the statutory officers group that wouldn't have a vote.
In which case, in effect, what you would be doing is allowing my elected member who's representative on the board here, Liz, to have a vote on the proposal once when she sits on the board at Banai, and then a second vote on it when it comes to the Y board.
What do you do?
I wouldn't ever have a vote on it as an officer.
Well, I think that's, yeah, I mean, is that a problem? I don't know. Claire, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, if I can, please. And it's only to say that when we talked, so one of the things that we talked about when the statutory officers group met earlier on this week was that we talked about this how the link would work if there was a voting right here, and this came up as an issue. There wasn't any decision made because what the group said was we needed to understand what the Nutrient Management Board decided to do in terms of the way that it worked and then respond to that. I do think it is just an issue for local authorities. My position is the same as Emma's, that I don't think it would be appropriate for an Environment Agency member to be voting on proposals that had come from us. So that is quite clear. I think what local authority colleagues agreed was that depending on what this group made about decisions it made about its own terms of reference, they would need to review that against their constitutions and their individual situations and views within their local authorities. So I don't think it should necessarily be for the NMB to decide, but it is something that local authorities will want to come in on, I believe.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Mary.
Firstly, thanks to Claire and Emma, because there was a lot of work that went in and you had to navigate lots of different opinions coming from different angles and also kind of reassure people, and that's never easy when you've got tension. So you did a lot of work, and I think everybody would be very grateful that you've kind of structured it as it is. I think it works. The board, I think, stays with the name because it aligns us with the Welsh model, which seems to kind of one river, one catchment kind of proposal. I don't think there's any reason not to have a board if that's fine with you guys, if you think it represents what it is. It's unlikely we're going to need to vote very much because I'm sure you are all going to come up with amazing ideas that we don't need to challenge and scrutinise. I'm sure that there won't be too many contentious votes, but I think if we are going to have votes, then yes, you probably can't have people voting their way through the different groups to then somehow weight the end result. We do need to think about how we represent the citizen science groups and the environmental groups, bearing in mind they could be two different things. They're not necessarily the same people. And a river voice is good, as is a tourism voice, because again, they are having this is having a huge impact on the tourism in terms of reputation and finances for probably all of the catchment, but specifically Herefordshire. I just have a quick question for the other authorities. You probably won't know the answer, but say you can't be the chair on a rotation. I presume that doesn't mean that you're not going to help fund the mechanism of these groups. So it can't fall to one authority or two authorities to pay for everything. I think there was a note about the Secretariat being funded by the chair, but if the chair's not rotating, then obviously the Secretariat funds would need to still be distributed fairly. And is everybody comfortable with the fact we have two fairly large plans that are pending, one being the River Wye government plan and the other being the diffuse water plan that could also change all of this anyway? So what do we do when we get those plans? Do we reconvene, or do we, if we're already divided into the three, is it up for the statutory officers group to decide what impact those have? And one last question, which I have been asked to ask, is are we going back to a nutrient management board and plan, or are we still specifically a phosphate action plan? Again, you don't have to answer that now.
Thanks, Mary. Claire, do you want to answer any of that before I go to Martin?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to come in on the diffuse water pollution plan in particular. I can offer a comment on the Secretary of State's plan, but it's not an answer, Mary. Work is carrying on that one. We don't have visibility of it. Obviously, we would look to tie in anything with this, but I don't have an answer on that yet. In terms of the diffuse water pollution plan, what we've said is that the folk who will be leading that within the Environment Agency will, through the tag, be working on that with the nutrient management plan. So effectively they become the same thing. But obviously, because that is Environment Agency, that is for the English part of the catchment. So we absolutely will be working hand in hand with NRW on that. So I don't think that one will be an issue. I'd be surprised if there's anything that comes out of the government plan that is a problem. The first thing that the statutory officers group has asked the tag to do is to review where we are. It's something we've been working towards for a while, but to review where we are with the content of the plan and to update it. So I hope there will be the opportunity to do that within it as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm just starting to watch the time a little bit, because one thing we haven't entirely bottomed out is the business of chairing. Martin.
Yeah, just to reiterate bits on what Claire said, really, it is, when we started this conversation, we were talking about whether it's a board or whether it's not a board, and the talk was around the remit and the output from that board. Basically, where does it sit? What can it do? When it comes to voting, there's a cross-pollination between this board and the executive group, or whatever we're going to call that now, because those members, there are certain members that will be on both. And so I think that is a job for councils to sort out, and the stat bods between you, how those two things work together, because you will in effect have people on both boards, both systems, voting on the same thing. Well, that's not quite correct. And so when it comes down to it, let's go back to the beginning. The Nutrient Management Board, if we're going to call it a board, what is its remit? What on earth is it going to be voting on? Or is it suggesting to the other group to vote on itself? And maybe the voting happens upstairs or in the room there in the corner if we don't like upstairs, rather than here. Because I think you're confusing the issue with too many voting bits and bobs, because I don't really see where the remit comes from. Sorry.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Catherine?
Sorry, yeah, I agree in terms of the voting. Any voting on decisions we, as has already been mentioned, we'd have to take back to council. So I'm really sorry to be difficult about this, but we haven't offered any funding and we're not in a position to do so, and we haven't done previously. It's not being not committed. It's our financial situation, and quite honestly, I think my colleagues, in terms of other councils in Monmouthshire, see us as being, if you like, the recipients of the problem, rather than the kind of creators of it. I don't mean that sounds so negative, but we don't benefit economically from some of the activities that create a lot of the problems, and actually we already are suffering quite a bit in terms of housing difficulties, etc. And I don't think I would get anything through in terms of, yes, we need to fund this activity, but our time is what we offer.
All right, thank you. Before I go to Rachel, I just want to sort of start drawing this in and say that we do have a broad agreement about the plan, the governance arrangements as described. We have agreement that the Nutrient Management Board will remain being called the Nutrient Management Board. The new group will be called the River Wye Statutory Officers Group. The role of the Nutrient Management Board will be to advise, comment upon, make constructive input to the work of the statutory officer group. So there is a constructive conversation between those two groups. So that we are broadly aligned. What we haven't entirely bottomed out is the business of chair. I haven't heard anyone say anything other than they don't want to chair it. But I still think that it's a good idea for the local authorities to have that role because of the role that they have as local authorities. But ideally, I would love I think the Welsh local authorities have a bigger voice, and maybe we have a co-chair arrangement or a vice chair arrangement or something, so that we have a good Welshness about it. It sounds really hopeless, but that's kind of like what I feel we could do with. But so I invite comments on the options around chairing, and also the secretariat. Rachel.
Yeah, I think we're making some. Just making sure I'm not on mute. I think we're making some progress here, aren't
we?
Well, in terms of focus and harmony, in terms of wanting to work collaboratively, that I've seen in a couple of years, and I think that is, testament to the work that has gone on behind the scenes over the last couple of months, led by particularly Claire, but also Emma, with hard work from other people. I think for me, the voting is probably a secondary issue because it's almost an advisory vote. There are no statutory decisions to take here. So I think for me, the voting issue falls away. But what I would say is that in order to fix the river, it requires change in the farming community. It requires changes in the water industry. It requires local authorities to work differently. It requires the agencies to work differently. And it requires the public to stand differently. And therefore, for me, a tweak to this is actually getting a stronger focus on public acceptance of plans. So we've created the space for this discussion. We have public questions coming to the board, but I think that whole comms area about what the board is, what the statutory officers group is, what the role of TAG is, which organisations can take decisions, that whole work needs to be done very, very carefully in order to move particularly farming, but also the environmental lobby with us along this journey. And I know, Alyssa, you're doing some work on a Rivers conference later this year that will actually help that conversation. But I think we mustn't lose sight of, we have our roles, we have our responsibilities, we create spaces to have those discussions in the right private and public forums. We create an opportunity for the public to ask questions of them, and we need to get better at doing that. The whole question of public acceptance will be whether we'll actually hit whether we actually ever get to discuss the real issues around fixing the river once we're able to move beyond these governance discussions. But I think we've made great progress over the last couple of months.
Thanks, Rachel. Jenny?
I would initially put my hand up just to express my support for the current chair, which I think you're doing a fantastic job. And I don't think that's been said particularly, today. So I fully support you as continuing in chair and rotating, perhaps if we can make it work. But actually, I think you're doing a great job. The only other thing is just to agree with Rachel that the comms piece and how we communicate what we're doing with the public is critically important and an absolutely enormous piece of work, and can start now that we know what the structure looks like. But there's certainly no mistaking that we all know how big a piece of work that is, and we need to make it crystal clear, you know, how we interact with people and what format that's going to take and how we do it effectively so that people feel engaged. Thanks.
Would it help if we unmixed who can be chair with the process for getting to chair? Because those are two different questions, aren't they? So the question on the paper is who can be chair. After that, there's a separate decision on who is the chair.
Okay. Well, I still think it's. I think local authorities, because we've got the broadest possible set of interests, as it were.
Okay.
Councillor Maybe.
That's fine. I'm seconding the vote for Councillor Swinglehurst to continue as chair. And I'm sorry, it's not only because I haven't got the time, it's because I think you do it very well, and I think it's important that it's somebody who really knows the topic and can cope with this detail of information as much as well as, you know, what you represent. So I'd just like to put that up, and I know that would, if you're willing to continue for the time being, it also allows time if we want to discuss other possibilities in the future.
Okay,
thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Phelps.
Yeah, just to second that, or third it or fourth it. Alyssa, you're a fantastic chair. I don't even know why somebody somewhere suggested that we should rotate a chair or move you on. I even found that frustrating anyway. And the second point to say is that, the previous councillor, sorry, I can't remember, don't have my notes here. The Forestering District cannot resource anything. We can't resource our statutory services. So I'm really sorry to say we won't be resourcing this, not because we don't want to. Well, I do wonder how useful all this is, but yeah, that's my personal cynicism. But Alyssa, you're doing a great job. Please stay as chair. Don't see all this discussion as any sort of undermining of your commitment and competence. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sid. Councillor Charlton.
Just quickly to add to that, I support everything that everybody's been saying. I do think you made a proposal earlier as well, Alyssa, I think, about having a vice chair. I think that's actually be a very good idea because, I mean, as I said, a bit like Catchment at the moment, we're on overload and I really don't have the capacity to take on the role of the chair. But I'd be very happy to support you as a vice chair, learn the role and see whether that could be something that could be changed in the future. Because I really don't feel that, you know, I've been here for a year, but a lot of that has been tense and very difficult. And it would be really nice to see that calm down and perhaps get into a routine where it becomes a lot easier and then it might not feel quite so daunting. On the funding, there was something in the chat box to say that NRW put some funds towards this. I don't know whether, Rachel, you can explain how the funding works on this.
Sure, yeah. Welsh Government have granted to a bid process. 30k of that has been, as part of that bid process, allocated for capacity building work in the Upper Y. I think it also included Monmouthshire as well, if I recall, and Powys are going to pick up very soon with Monmouthshire and ourselves, building on the capacity building work that's already been done. We also have an allocation of 40k to actually support the TAG in developing its role and remit, which we, in discussion with colleagues in statutory agencies, placed on hold because this governance discussion was taking place. But now that we've had this discussion, there is an allocation that could support the work of TAG, which is why I talked about the requirement for an updated nutrient management plan earlier in the meeting, because the two tie together. So yeah, that's where we're up to on that. I'll pick that up specifically with the statutory officers group, because I think that needs working through with the statutory officers group.
Okay. Fine, thank you. Has anyone got any other further comments? All right, so are we going to say that we have arrived at a consensus with the update and the governance arrangements as presented, and that we're not going to change the chairing arrangements? I don't want to put thoughts into anyone's heads, but if that's where we've got to, that's where we've got to. Okay, all right, thank you. It might, I'm just wondering whether we need to just do I'd hate to make work for somebody else, Claire, but to do incorporate the updates into the final document.
I'm happy to do that, Alyssa, and then
with kind of where we think we've got to here.
Yeah.
Send it out to everyone, and we'll consider it agreed unless you hear a strong otherwise. Is that okay? Because it's just, there's an awful lot to take on board here. I feel we have reached consensus, but if everyone could confirm that, then that's fine, and then hopefully we will move forward with the new governance arrangements as soon as that's occurred. So, if that's all right with everyone. Yep. Okay. Fantastic.
Alyssa, can I just say, there's been lots of very kind comments, but it's been a lot of people on the screen, and possibly some who aren't here today, who've made that work and made that change. Not me or Emma. It's been everybody in there, and I do think we need to acknowledge that. It's been a really transformational shift in the way we're working, and that's all of us that have done that.
Yeah, it has. I think it's great. Well done, everyone, for getting to where we've got to. I am cognizant that in the updates that we didn't take updates from Dokomi or WAF because I didn't have written updates coming in. But if anyone's got anything they really want to share, just now would be the moment.
No significant changes since our last, well, the business plan was published on Monday, but contents thereof were decided previously. I have having had some conversation with Martin this week. EA have agreed to let us share in a limited capacity the phosphorus schemes coming on the lower Y, which we've not been able to do yet. So
goody.
I'm put that together
in
a limited capacity. So not the full WINEP, obviously, but the potential for collaboration opportunities in the same style that we've done for the upper Y.
Awesome. Good. That's something to look forward to.
That's out the bag, Martin. I'm going to have to do it now.
No, that's great. Thank you. Now, and the other thing I just wanted to put in everyone's minds is whether or not, there is a point at which we want to move to physical meetings from virtual meetings. I remain, as open-minded as ever. I think there are advantages to both. The principal advantage to virtual, obviously, being that the impact on the planet is much less, but it does mean that we don't have that kind of face-to-face human contact, which is helpful in a number of respects. It maybe that we want to kind of do a mix and match or whatever, but I'd be very helpful if you have views on that, just to let me know or have a think about it, where we want to get to with it, because I want to keep a watching brief on that, as it were. Okay, so that's great. So we've got the next meeting 17th of January, 2 till 4, which may well be in our new exciting format. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you all for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.